there, it's Lael with Lael by Mail. In this video, we are working on pre-cutting our papers for the Hello Halloween 6x8 mini album. So when we begin class, separate video, but when we begin class, the assumption is your papers have already been cut. So you definitely want to do this before class. All right, so I've pulled a couple of things aside. Number one, you should have received a link to download the color step-by-step Hello Halloween 6x8 mini album instructions. So if you do not have these, you'll want to stop and print these out or bring them up on your computer so you can follow along in the cutting instructions. Cutting instructions you're going to find on the last two pages. I have already printed mine out. So we have page 11 and page 12. I have pulled all of the papers out of the kit, including the Moonlit Manor papers, as well as both black sheets and the white 8.5 by 11 sheet. So you'll want to have all of these. And just as a note, before you maybe start moving any of these papers around, we will be cutting the papers in order that they are packaged. So if you just pull them straight out of the package, we'll be going one by one through. The last thing that we will do, and I'll talk about this again at the end, but we will be fussy cutting the packaging for the Moonlit Manor large die cut pieces, all right? So we'll be taking the pieces out and then fussy cutting some of the pieces from the back of the packaging for our project. All right, so we will be cutting a lot of papers, and as we're cutting, you're going to end up with a lot of different pieces from each paper. So I suggest you gather something that will help you kind of keep everything together until class, whether you are using paper clips to clip like papers together. I'll be using little sorting trays like this, where I just put each pattern into each of the little divider sections. I have included in the description box of the video a kind of sorters like this, both this one, the little scallops, and similar. So I'm actually using 3 of these because we have so many different papers and I'll have a slot for each paper. All right, so as we get going, I will be following along step by step with each of these cutting diagrams. You will see you have the diagram as well as the written word. So I encourage you to just follow along with me. All right, we're starting out with the Moonlit Manor cover. And we will be using primarily this side as we are cutting, but at one point in the project, we will be cutting one of these little pieces. So just keep everything together. We are going to trim a 6-inch wide by 12-inch tall piece. So basically, note how I have this placed in my trimmer. Now, I've learned over the years that there's a kitty paw. Come on, Reg. Little kitty paw. He's, I guess, really interested in what we're doing. Hopefully he won't bother us anymore. But not everyone, a lot of people use their trimmer differently. Some people might have the blade on the right. Some people might have it on the left. Some people even have the trimmer or the blade on the bottom. So there is no right or wrong way. You just want to make sure you're getting the orientation correct. So I am holding my paper this way and it tells me I want to trim 6-inch wide by 12 inches tall. So I'm just going to move that over to 6 inches wide by 12-inch tall. I now have 2 pieces that are 6-inch wide by 12-inch tall. Then trim 6x4 and a 6x8 piece. So we'll just take one of these, and if we trim that to 8, that will give us a 6x4 and a 6x8. Trim a 2.7 wide by 3-inch tall piece. So we're putting these 2 away, right? We needed our 4x6 and our, whoopsie, get those together like that, our 4x6 and our 6x8. From what we have left over, we are going to trim a 2 3/4 wide by 3 inches tall. So it doesn't matter this side. We won't be using this side for this. We will come back to something here later, but trim 2.7 by 3 tall. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this to 3 tall, and then 2 3/4 wide. All right. So there we go. I am taking the rest of these pieces and also putting them together in this little section with those papers. So I'm trying to keep my like patterns together. All right, so that's our first one. Next one, our characters. And if you're not quite sure which paper is which, it will also tell you that has an orange grid on the back. So if you need a little frame of reference. This one says to also trim a 6 wide by 12 tall. Notice how I have my characters, right? So when I am done, I have 2 sheets of 6-inch wide by 12-inch tall. So I have little characters that are on the short side, if that makes sense. So trim 6, then trim to 6 wide by 8 tall and 6 wide by 4. We've got the same thing going again here. Because we are working in a pocket page album, we are going to have quite a few pieces that are like a 4 by 6 and a 6 by 8. So those two are good to go. Now we are looking at this part of our diagram. We will be cutting those pieces. Remember, at any time in the process that I am cutting, if you need a couple more minutes to finish something up, you can go ahead and press pause, kind of finish cutting, and then, press play again. All right, so next up, we have a 3 by 12 piece, okay? 3 by 12. Then trim to a 3 by 4 and a 3 by 8, okay? So there's our 3 by 4 and our 3 by 8. Those are going over here with those same friends. And then we need a 3 by 5. Okay, so it's already 3, so we're going to trim our 3 by 5. And from what we have left over, this piece, we need a 1 by 5. So 1 inch wide by 5 inches tall. So let's do this. Let's do, let's see, that is 3. So let's change this to 2. There is a piece that is 1 inch wide and 1 inch wide by 5 tall. And all of these little pieces, just for safekeeping, I am going to put into, my my little tray over there. You can also see all of your diagrams here. I just realized I forgot a cut there. We forgot this last cut that says 3 wide by 4 1/4 tall. So we have this piece that's left over from cutting this strip here, 3 wide by 4 tall, 4.25 tall. So it's 3 inches wide. And now we're going to trim that to 4.25 inches tall. Sorry about that. You probably panicked for a minute there. Okay, next up, we have our frames paper with the spider webs on the back. And again, I am going to be orienting my paper the same way in the trimmer. It is telling me to trim the sheet in half vertically, then trim 2 4 by 6s and 2 6 by 8s. So we'll do this. Here is my 12 by 12. That is going to give me now 2 6 by 12s. And each of those, I will trim a 4 by 6 and a 6 by 8. So as we see that, my 6 by 8 has my frames going horizontally. Likewise with my 4 by 6. And we will do the same thing here. My 4 by 6 and 6 by 8. Easy peasy. All right, so for our haunted houses paper, this one we are going to rotate. We want to start out by trimming a 12 inch wide by 8 inch tall piece. So we're going to rotate that like we did on our last paper. 12 inch wide by 8 inch tall. And then we want to trim that to 2 6 inch wide by 8 inch tall pieces. 2 more 6 by 8s. We'll put that over there. Then we need to trim a 12 inch wide by 1 inch tall piece. So 12 inch wide, it is 4 inches tall. So we'll just slide it over there. That will give us our 12 by 1. Our 12 by 1, we want to trim to an 8 3/4 wide and a 3 inch wide. So this is just a little bit wider than 3. Trim that to 3 inches. So 8 1/4 by 1 and 3 by 1. After that, with the piece that we have left over, we're going to trim a 4 1/4 wide by 3 inch tall piece. All right, so let's go. We know it's 3 inches tall, right? So 4 1/4 wide. There we go. And then we want to trim a 2 inch wide by 3 inch tall piece. All right, so it's still 3 inches tall. So we want to trim that, 2.5 inches wide. So 2.5 inches wide by 3 inches tall. Then we're going to trim that into 2 1.5 inch tall pieces. So just rotate that. And there's our little pieces that are both 2.5 now by 1.5. From the remaining piece, this little guy that we have left, we are going to trim a 3 inch wide by 1 1/4 tall. 3 inch wide. 3 inch wide by 1 1/4 tall. Right there. And then a 2 3/4 wide by 0.75 tall. So 2 3/4 wide by 0.75 tall. So it is 1 3/4. So if I just trim that little guy in half, let's just make a little half-ish mark here since my trimmer won't be able to see that space. So it is 1 3/4. So if we do that, that is going to be our 3/4 mark right there. Alrighty. So now just go ahead and take all those little pieces that you have left and slide them in with the other Haunted Mansion or Haunted House papers. For our potion bottles, we are trimming a 12-inch wide by 5-inch tall piece. So we're going to do the same thing that we did with the last paper. We are rotating it. That gives us a nice 12-inch wide by 5-inch tall piece. Then we are trimming that to 8 3/4 inches wide. 8 3/4 inches wide. That 8 3/4 inches wide piece, we are then trimming into two 2.5 tall pieces, right? So it's already 5 inches wide. So we're basically trimming that in half. So now we have 2 pieces that are 8 3/4 wide by 2.5 inch tall. And in my little divider tray, they go. With that piece that I have left, we are trimming that remaining piece to 3 inches wide by 4 1/4 tall. So 3 inches wide by 4 1/4 tall. All right. Then we have the piece that we have left, that bottom part that we cut off. Next up, we are trimming a 12-inch wide by 4-inch tall piece. So we're going to trim 12-inch wide by 4-inch tall. So I rotated that again. There is my 12 inches wide by 4 inches tall. And that one we need, let's see, 6 by 4 and a 5 by 4. So there's my 6 by 4 and my 5 by 4. And that's just going to leave me with that little piece right there. Okay. My 3 pieces. And last but not least, with what we have left over, we are trimming a 6-inch wide by 1.5 inch tall piece. So let's do 6 inches wide by 1.5 inches tall. And again, all of those little pieces I am putting all together in that same little divider tray that I'm using to separate all my papers. So again, whether you are separating with a paper clip or you're separating with a tray or stacks or envelopes, folders, whatever it is, make sure you keep those little guys separated. It'll make it a lot easier when we are ready to work. All right, next up we have our ghost piece. Orange stars on the back. We need to start out by trimming a 2-inch wide by 12-inch tall piece. So over here, 10-inch. There is 2-inch wide by 12-inch tall. And then we need to trim that to 11.5 inches. So just take a little bit off of that, adding that to our next little tray there. Trim a 10-inch wide by 4-inch tall piece. So that's what we have left, 10 inches wide. So I've rotated that, 4 inches tall. Trim a 10 by 4 tall piece from the remaining piece, then trim that one to 8 3/4 wide. Okay, 8 3/4 wide. Next up, we have, oh, I get lost. I lose my where I am in my directions. Trim a 6-inch wide by 12-inch tall piece from the remaining piece. All right, 6 inches wide by 8 inches tall. So 6 inches wide, and we already 8 inches tall, so 6-inch wide. Then trim to 6-inch wide by 1.5. 6-inch wide by 1.5. 6-inch wide by 2. And then a 6-inch wide by 4. So of that piece, we had our 6 by 1.5, our 6 by 2, and our 6 by 4. Left over, we have a 3.5 wide by 3.5 tall. So a 3.5 by 3.5. And finally, we have a 1.5 wide by 2.25 tall. So 1.5 wide. Let's do two. Let's see. 2.25 tall. We'll start that way. 2.25 tall by 1.5 wide. So just a little guy. All right. Now I'm going to save all of these pieces. We won't use them all, but it's just easiest to keep them all together in their same little folder or tray or paper clip or whatever it is you're doing to contain all your pieces. All right, our next paper is our candy, and there can be a direction to this paper. I know that's kind of hard to tell because all of the candies are kind of in all different directions, so probably doesn't matter how you cut it. On the back side, your stars are kind of going in different directions too, so I'm going to put it in and cut. Trim a 6-inch wide by 12-inch tall piece. 6-inch wide by 12-inch tall piece. Then trim 6 by 8 and 6 by 4. All right. So here's our 6 by 8 and our 6 by 4. With what we have left over, our 6 by 12, we are going to trim a 5.5 wide by 7.5 tall piece. So let's go to 7.5 tall, and we need that to be 5.5 wide, 5.5 by 7.5. And then we need a 3.5 wide by 2.5 tall piece. So 3.5 wide by 2.5 tall piece. And from what we have left over, we need a 1.25 wide by 2-inch tall piece. So 1.25 wide by 2 inches tall. Just another little guy. All right, and as we've been doing, just go ahead and grab all of those remaining little pieces and put them with the other candy/star pieces. Next up, we have the Harlequin paper. And the Harlequin paper, to me, definitely has a direction to it. We are going to trim a 12-inch wide by 8-inch tall piece. Then trim to 2 6 by, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut it in half, 2 6 by 12s. One of those, we need a 6 by 8 and a 4 by 6. And then the other one, we need a 6 by 8. And 4 by 6. I'm going to leave both of these 6 by 8, 4 by 6. At one point, we will need to cut one of those, but we're going to save that when we get there. So with the pumpkins piece, we are going to start out by trimming a 12-inch wide by 3/4 inch tall piece. 12 inches wide by 3/4 inches tall. And note, I rotated the paper, depending again on how you use your trimmer. 12 inches wide by 3/4 tall. So there is my piece, 12 inches wide by 3/4 tall. Then we want to trim that one to 8 inches wide. And now sorting those little guys into another little divided tray. Trim a 6-inch wide by 11-inch tall piece. All right, so 6-inch wide by 11 inches tall. It's already, 6-inch wide. So we trimmed a 6-inch wide piece from the remaining piece. And now we are going to trim that into two 3-inch wide by 8-inch tall pieces. So let's go 8 inches tall. And then that is 6. So we will go 3 and 3. And that guy we can just put off to the side that we have left. Now we have our other 6 by 12. So from the remaining 6 by 12 piece, we're going to trim a 5-inch wide by 7-inch tall piece. So 7 inches tall by 5 inches wide. And from that remaining piece, we are going to trim a 3-inch wide by 4 1/4 tall piece. So it's already 4 1/4. We need a 3-inch wide by 4 1/4 inch tall piece. And from that last little guy, we need a 2 1/2 wide by 3 1/2 tall piece. So 2 1/2 wide by 3 1/2 tall. And those little pieces are going into their next little folder there. All right, for our first black piece, we are going to trim a 5 1/2 wide by 12-inch tall piece. 5 1/2 wide by 12-inch tall. Then trim two 5 1/2 wide by 3.75 tall pieces. So 5 1/2, that'll give us 3.75 and 3.75. We'll set those off in our little tray. Trim a 5 1/2 wide by 3.75 tall piece. So 5 1/2 wide by 3.75 tall piece. Then trim two 2.75 by 3.75 pieces. All right, so two pieces that are 2.75. Basically, we just cut that guy in half. All right, then we need to trim a 6-inch wide by 3-inch tall piece. So let's go ahead and trim this. 6-inch wide by 3-inch tall. Then trim a 5 wide by 3.75 tall. 5 wide by 3.75 tall. Then trim to two 2 1/2 wide pieces. All right, two 2 1/2 wide pieces. Okay. Trim a 3 by 5 piece from what we have left over. All right, so let's see, that's 5, and then that would be 3, our 3 by 5. Now we are going to move to our white piece, our 8.5 by 11 white piece. This one we are just trimming a 5 1/4 wide by 7 1/4 tall. So 5 1/4 wide by 7 1/4 tall. Easy peasy. Okay, now we're in the home stretch, friends. We are moving to all of our cut apart papers. All right, our cut apart papers. So we have this guy. We'll do this guy last. We have our 4 by 6, 6 by 8, our 4 by 6s, and our 3 by 4s. And each of these we are going to trim exactly as you would expect. So on our 4 by 4 cards, or excuse me, 3 by 4 cards, we are cutting them into 12 little pieces, right? 12 little 3 by 4 cards. And go ahead and add those to whatever method you are using to keep things sorted. We want to keep all of those little 3 by 4s together. Oh, we're at the end. We're just about at the end. This is the part that it's kind of, you have to do the not as fun part, get all the cutting done out of the way, and then you can play. But that is why we are cutting ahead of time. So you can take your time, relax, get all of your cutting done, stop, pause, restart, rewind, whatever you need to do. So you can take your time and get all your cutting done so that when we are ready to put everything together in the main part of class, you will be ready to hit the ground running. Okay. So those are our 3 by 4s. Next, we're moving to our 4 by 6s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is a full 4 by 6 card. We are not cutting that apart. Okay, dokie, 6 4x6 cards there. Those are all done. And I am adding those in another separate area. Let's see, I'll probably end up with about, I don't know, maybe 15. Is it 15 what I end up with? Different little containers, I guess, for my each of my papers. And again, you could use a paper clip for each paper. You could use a file folder for each paper. Oopsie, don't cut there. I almost cut that in the wrong spot. I get ahead of myself. I get chatty and then stop paying attention. So that piece should have given us 2 6x8s and 2 4x6s. And then we're going to come here. Now this one, we just have to be a little bit more, we'd pay a little bit more attention as we are cutting this, because we can't necessarily like cut all the way across here, because we'll, you know, cut into some of these things. So I'm going to start from the right and cut. All right, so we've got all these little guys, those fun little word strips. And then let's look again. Okay, we can cut here next. So we're working right to left. As of now, at some point we won't be able to do that. Then we'll have to kind of approach it from another way. So this goes right, this goes here. So your little banners we're cutting off. This one's a little bit trickier in terms of just being able to identify exactly where you are cutting. But just follow me. I got you. No worries. All right, so now I am actually going to rotate this because I don't want to cut here. If I cut right here vertically, I will be cutting apart that Halloween piece. So rotating, so I can come at it from this side and get some clean cuts there. And then now I can cut off this bottom piece. Separate that guy. And now I am home free. Or home stretch, or I don't know, something like that. Home free, I guess that works, right? I'm in the home stretch. I'm home free in the home stretch. How about that? And then just all those little pieces now I am cutting apart. And these are 3 pieces here. All righty, so the last thing that we are going to do, where did I put those little guys? Oh, here we go. My package of large die cuts. So the large die cuts are really fun. Oh, actually, let's clean up here, Leo. Hold on. I want to grab all these little pieces that I cut from that paper, and we are going to keep all of them together, and we will put them in another one of these little, one of my little things that I'm using back here to store all my papers. Okay. So everything just stays together and separated, but you know what I mean. Okay, so now we're moving over to our large die cuts. The instructions tell you to save the packaging, right? So I am going to, until class, I am actually going to leave my large die cuts in the bag and focus on this guy now. So there are some parts in the project kit where we are actually going to use some of the pieces here on the back of the packaging. This is the second time we've done the large die cuts, and they're really fun to play with. The large die cuts, just because they're a larger size, you can use them in mini books like we are here. You can use them on scrapbook pages. You can use them in traveler's notebooks. There's really no limit to what you can use them, what you can or can't use them for. But because they're so large, the packaging is larger, which means the die cuts on the backside or the images of the product on the backside are like giant die cuts for us, right? So we can use these guys. Now, we did not use the, I don't believe, we did not use the spiderweb. You could certainly use that for something. I don't believe we had used the October either, but you could certainly come in and use your little scissor just at the top and the bottom. If you wanted to get a little fussier with that, you certainly could. I will leave it at this one for now, just in case. I just honestly don't recall right now if we used that or not. So we'll just put that there in the front, my little tray there. we did definitely use these two guys, all right? So what I'm going to do is come in with my small pair of scissors, and I'm just kind of getting most of the excess away from these guys. And then I'm going to switch over to my fussy cutting scissors. So my fussy cutting scissors obviously work very different than a regular pair of scissors. There is nowhere for my fingers to go. You're using a different part of your hand for cutting and not necessarily your fingers. So with my fussy cutting scissors, they have a little edge there and a little edge there. Your thumb goes on the top and your pointer finger goes on the bottom. The scissors are spring-loaded, so you kind of see that little spring mechanism on the back, and it's that spring-loaded mechanism that's doing most of the work for you. So I barely have to move my little fingers here in order to get those scissors to move. So I'm holding them in my hand like this, and I will just cut like this. And because the scissors are spring-loaded, because I'm holding them differently, because the blades are very small, my hand has to do very little work in order to be able to cut. And it also can give me a nice precise cut for the same reason. So you'll notice as I start working with these, my right hand, my dominant hand, my hand that is doing the cutting, is barely moving. It is my left hand that is rotating my piece. So my right hand is pretty much just staying in place as I cut. Now, you don't have to have fussy cutting scissors to do this, right? You can use whatever scissors you have. When it comes to fussy cutting, I always recommend that you use the smallest pair of scissors that you have, because just the smaller your scissor, the more, what's the right word I'm looking for? The more control you have. How about that? The more control you have, and the more you'll be able to get your kind of precise cuts in there. All right, so there we go. There is my little ghost. And I will do the same thing here with my little candy cane tag. Like so. And I am going to leave it, actually, I'm going to switch now. If I'm cutting a straight line, it's much easier just to come back in with my regular scissors, right? It's more that the fussy cutting scissors are designed for getting into small places. All right, so I'm going to leave that for now. I know I need those two. I partially cut October. We don't use the spider web. You could certainly use that for something else. And I don't believe that we do use the pumpkins either, but I will put all of those things together so that when I need some of those pieces, they are all together waiting for me. All right, friends, so make sure to take a look at the date and time for the live class to put together our album. That is September 8th at, let me just look at my calendar here. September 8th at Tuesday, September 8th at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. Now, if 4:30 p.m. Pacific time on the 8th of September does not work for you, no worries. You can watch that class at any time after it is over. So be ready for the 8th. Make sure you've done all your fussy cutting. Make sure you printed out your instructions, and we'll be ready to have fun on the 8th. Bye-bye.